This is what Adonai Elohim says. The east gate of the inner courtyard is to be shut on the 6 working days, but on Shabbat is to be opened, and on Rosh Hodesh it is to be opened. The prince is to enter by way of the outer vestibule of the gate and stand by the support of the gate. The Kohanim are to prepare his burnt offerings and the peace offerings. Then he is to prostrate himself in worship at the threshold of the gate, after that which he is to leave. But the gate is not to be shut until evening. The people of the land are also to prostrate themselves in worship before Adonai at the entrance gate on Shabbat and Rosh Hodesh. The burnt offerings the prince is to offer Adonai on Shabbat is to consist of 6 lambs without defect and a ram without defect. The grain offerings is to be a bushel for the ram, while the lamb is to be as much as he wants to give, with 1 gallon of olive oil per ephah. On Rosh Hodesh it is to be a young bull, 6 lambs, and a ram, all without defect. He is to prepare a grain offering consisting of a bushel for the bull, a bushel for the lamb, and for the lambs as much as his means allow, with a gallon of olive oil per bushel. When the princes enter, he is to go in by way of the vestibule of the gate, and he is to leave by the same way. But when the people of the land come before Adonai at the designated times, whoever comes into worship by way of the north gate is to leave by way of the south gate, and whoever comes in by way of the south gate is to leave by the way of the north gate. He is not to go back out through the gate which he entered, but is to exit straight ahead of him. On these occasions, the prince is to be among them when they enter, and when they leave, they are to leave together. At the festivals and at designated times, the grain offering is to be for a bushel for a young bull and a bushel for a ram, while the lambs, it can be as much as he wants to give, with a gallon of olive oil per bushel. When the prince provides a voluntary offering, whether it is a burnt offering or a peace offering that he offers voluntary to Adonai, someone is to open the east gate for him, and he is to provide his burnt offering and peace offering as he does on Shabbat. Then he will leave. After he leaves, the gate is to be shut. You are to provide a lamb in its first year that has no defect for a daily burnt offering to Adonai. Do this each morning. Also, each morning, provide with a grain offering 1/6 of a bushel, 1/3 of a gallon of olive oil to moisten the fine flour. This is the ongoing grain offering for Adonai by a permanent regulation. Thus, they will offer a lamb, a grain offering and oil each morning as the outgoing burnt offering. Adonai Elohim says this: if the prince turns over part of his hereditary property to one of his sons, it is his inheritance. It will belong to his sons. It is their possession. It is their possession by inheritance. But if he gives part of his hereditary property to one of his slaves, it will be until the year of freedom, at which the time will revert to the prince, so that the prince's heritage will go to his sons. The prince is not to take over any of the people's inheritance, thereby evicting them wrongfully from their property. He is to give his sons an inheritance out of his own property, so that none of my people will be driven off their property. Next, he brought me through the entry at the side gate into the holy rooms facing the north were for the Kohanim. At their far west end I saw a place, about which he said to me, this is the place where the Kohanim will boil the guilt offerings, the sin offerings, and bake the grain offerings. In this way they won't have to bring them to the outer courtyard and risk transmitting holiness to the people. He took me into the outer courtyard and had me pass by the 4 corners of the courtyard. And there at each corner of the courtyard was another courtyard. And the 4 corners of the courtyard were enclosed courtyards 70 feet long and 52.5 feet wide. The 4 courtyards and the corners were the same size. There was a wall around each of the 4, with open stoves all around the bases of the walls. He said to me, these are the stoves where those serving in the house will boil the people's sacrifices. He then brought me back to the entrance of the house. I saw water flowing eastward from under the threshold of the house, for the house faced east. The water flowed down from under the right side of the house, south of the altar. Next he led me out through the north gate and took me around the outside of the outer gate by way of the east gate, where I saw water trickling from the south side. With a line in his hand, the man went out toward the east and measured 1,000 cubits, 1/3 a mile. And he made me wade across the stream. The water came up to my ankles. He measured another 1,000, made me wade out the water, which reached my knees. He measured another 1,000, made me wade through the water up to my waist. Finally, he measured 1,000. River I couldn't cross on foot because the water was so deep, one would have to swim across. It was a river that could not be waded through. He asked me, human being, have you seen this? Then guiding me, he got me back to the riverbank. After being returned, I saw the bank river, a great number of trees on one side and on the other. He said to me, this water flows toward the eastern region, continues down to the Arava. When it enters the sea of stagnant water, the Dead Sea, its water will become fresh. When this happens, swarms of all kinds of living creatures will be able to live in whatever the streams flow, so that there will be a vast number of fish. This water is flowing there, so that whenever the river goes, everything will be restored and able to live. When fishermen will stand on its shores, spreading their nets all the way from En-Gedi to En-Eglaim, there will be as many kind of fish there as in the Great Sea, the Mediterranean, a great variety. However, its mudflats and marshes will not become fresh, but will remain salty. On both riverbanks will grow all kinds of trees for food. Their leaves will not dry up, nor will their fruit fail. There will be all different kinds of fruit each month, because the water flows from the sanctuary, so that this fruit will be edible, and the leaves will be healing properties. Adonai Elohim says this, these are the borders of the land you are to distribute for inheritance by the 12 tribes of Israel, with Joseph receiving 2 portions. For inheritance you will each have equal shares. I swore to your ancestors that I would give them this land, and now it falls to you to inherit it. The borders of the land will be as follows. On the north, from the Great Sea through Hethlon to the entrance of Zedad, Hamat, Beratah, Sibraim, which is between the border of Damascus, the border of Hamat, Hatzir, Hatzahon, which is toward the border of Hebron. The border from the sea will be Hatzir, Enon, the border of Damascus, while in the northward, in the border of Hamat, this is the north side. On the east side, measure between Hebron and Damascus, Gilad, land of Israel by the Jordan, from the border of the eastern sea, this is the east side. On the side of the Negev, toward the south, it will be from Tamar, as far as the waters of Mirvot Kadesh. Then the Valley of Egypt, and on the Great Sea, this is the south side of the Negev. The west side will be the Great Sea as far as across the entrance of Hamat. This is the west side. This is the territory you are to divide among the tribes of Israel. You are to divide it by lot as an inheritance both to you and to the foreigners living among you who give birth to your children, to children living among you. For they are to be no different from the native born among the people of Israel. They are to have an inheritance with you among the tribes of Israel. You are to give the foreigner an inheritance of the territory of the tribe with whom he is living, says Adonai Elohim. Following is the list of tribes. This is Dan's territory, from the north end through Hethlon, the entrance of Hamat, Hatzar, Enan, at the border of Damascus, northward, next to Hamat, and they will have their sides east and west. Asher's territory will run alongside the territory of Dan from east to west. Naphtali's territory will run alongside the territory of Asher from east to west. Manasseh's territory will run alongside the territory of Naphtali from east to west. Ephraim's territory will run alongside the territory of Manasseh from east to west. Reuven's territory will run alongside the territory of Ephraim from east to west. Yehuda's territory will run alongside Reuven's from east to west. Alongside the territory of Yehuda from east to west will be the offering you are to set aside 25,000 cubits wide, 8 miles. And its length will equal the distance between the east and the west boundaries of one of the portions with the sanctuary inside. The offerings you are to set aside for Adonai is to be 8 miles long and 3 wide. This holy offering will be for the Kohanim. It will be 8 miles in length along its north and south sides, 3 in width along its west and east sides. Adonai's sanctuary will be inside it. The portion set aside the holy will be for the Kohanim, who are descendants of Zadok, that remain faithful to my commission, and do not go astray when the people of Israel and the Levi'im went astray. It is to be a specially holy portion, set apart for them and taken from the offerings of the land next to the border of the Levi'im. Alongside the territory of the Kohanim, for the Kohanim, the Levi'im are to have a portion 8 miles long and 3 wide. Its total length will be 8 and its width 3. They are not to sell, exchange, or alienate any of this choice land because it is holy for Adonai. The 5,000 cubits, that is 1.5 miles, they are left in the width and be for common use of the city for housing and for open fields. The city will be inside it. Will measure 4,500 cubits, just under 1.5 miles, along each side of its sides, north, south, east, west. The city is to have outside its border land 440 feet wide, and each side north, south, east, west. A strip next to the holy offerings extending 3 miles to the east and 3 to the west is to be left. This area by the holy offerings is to be used to grow food and farm it. The entire offering will be 8 miles square, including the section of the city. What remains will be for the prince. Land on the 2 sides of the holy offering section for the city, that is, the portion eastward from the 8 miles of the offering, eastern border, the land's eastern border, and the portion of the westward from 8 miles of the offering's western border, the land western border. This land adjacent to the tribal portions will be for the prince, with the holy offerings of the sanctuary, the house inside it. Thus the land belonging to the Levi'im and the section for the city will be inside, which belongs to the prince. The territory belonging to the prince will be between the territory of Yehuda and the territory of Benjamin, which brings us to the rest of the tribes. Benjamin's territory run from east to west. Shimon's territory run alongside the territory of Benjamin from east to west. Yissachar's territory run alongside territory of Shimon from east to west. Zebulun's territory run alongside the territory of Yissachar from east to west. Gad's territory run alongside the territory of Zebulun from east to west. Along the territory of Gad from the Negev southward, the border will run to Tamar, from the water of Mirvat, Kadesh, then the Valley of Egypt, and on to the great sea. That is the land that are distributed by lot the tribes of Israel for inheritances. These are the portions, says Adonai Elohim. These are the city's exits. They are to be named for the tribes of Israel, 3 gates on each of the 4 sides. 4 sides each measure just under 1.5 miles. On the north, gates named after Reuven, Yehuda, and Levi. On the east gates, named after Joseph, Benjamin, and Dan. On the south gates, named after Shimon, Yissachar, Zebulun. And on the west gates, named after Gad, Asher, and Naphtali. The perimeter of the city will be just under 6 miles long. From that day on, the name of the city will be Adonai Shema. Adonai is here.